In Route 53, I'm going to check the domain name that I'm looking for. Let me see if ikigaism.com is available. Check, and the exact match is available for $14 a year. I'm going to click on Select and proceed to check out. Here I can select how long I want this domain. I'm going to select 1 year, and I'm going to enable Auto Renew. Now I click on Next. Here I'm going to fill out my details, and then I'm going to hit Next. Now I'm going to review all of my information, and then scroll down, and then select that I agree to the terms and conditions. I understand that domain operation charges are non-refundable. I'm going to hit Submit, and then it says, the request to register the following domains is in progress. You will receive a registration status email for each domain. I'm going to click on Check Status, and we could see that the status is in progress. So let's wait for that email. It's been about 10 minutes. I got this email from Amazon saying that my domain was successfully registered. And now let's refresh this page, and our status changed to successful. Now I'm in Visual Studio Code, and I'm connected to WSL. If you're new here, I have another tutorial explaining how to set that up. I'm going to go into my Explorer, click on Open Folder, and then go into my user directory. Hit OK. I've already created a folder called Repos, which will house all of my projects. So inside the Repos folder, I'm going to create a new folder and call it the name of my project. So in my case, Ikigaism project. And then I'm going to open a new terminal, and I'm going to cd into my project folder. Now I'm going to create a virtual environment. So assuming you already have Python venv set up, I'm going to do Python 3 -m venv, and then the name of my virtual environment, which I want to call .venv. Enter. Now if I expand my project folder, you could see that I've created the virtual environment. So now let's activate it, and I do that with source.venv/bin/activate. Enter. And now you could see I've activated my virtual environment. Now let's install Reflex. I'm going to do pip install Reflex. Enter. And now we've successfully installed Reflex. Now I can initialize my project with Reflex init. Enter. And I get an error that says system package unzip is missing. So I have to go install this package. But first I want to update apt. So I'm going to do sudo apt update, type in my password, and then I'm going to install the unzip package with sudo apt install unzip. And now that I've installed unzip, let's try to run Reflex init. It's asking which template I'd like to use, and I want to start with a blank Reflex app. So I'm going to hit 0, enter, and now I've successfully initialized this project. If I go into my project folder, you could see it's created an app folder with the name of my project. Let's expand that, and if I go into the project file, then this is where the magic happens. All of this will get rendered as the front end of my app, which we will see in a little bit. Now I'm going to do Reflex run to run my application, and let's give it a minute or two. And now it says the app is running at localhost 3000. So let's open this in the browser, and this is what it looks like. So if I go into my project file and change Reflex to Ikigaism and save and return to localhost 3000, then we could see the updates. Now our tutorial here isn't about how to design a Reflex app, it's about how to deploy this app on AWS. So let's assume that my app is done, and I want to start the deployment process. Then let's go back to my project, and I'm going to go to rxconfig.py, and I'm going to include a new parameter, API URL equals the name of my website, including the HTTPS. So it's going to look like https://ikigaism.com, and save. I'm going to open a new terminal so that I could cd into my project folder, and then I'm going to activate my virtual environment with source.venv/bin/activate, and I'm going to do pip freeze greater than requirements.txt, enter. By running this, it's going to save a list of all of the packages that I used along with their respective versions in the requirements file right here. And you could see this list. Now inside my project folder, I'm going to create a new file and call it Dockerfile. And here I'm going to write a set of instructions for Docker to assemble this project and have it running in the virtual machine. So I'm going to start with from Python 3.12, or whatever version of Python you're using. Then I want it to install Redis. And so I'm going to do run apt get update, and then install the Redis server, and then remove some files. Then I'm going to overwrite some environmental variables with env redis URL equals redis / localhost and set python buffered equal 1. Now I want to set the working directory and copy my code. So I'm going to do workdir /app to set this as my working directory, and then copy everything over with dot space dot. Now I'm going to install dependencies with run pip install --no -cache -dir -r requirements.txt. So this is going to install everything listed in the requirements.txt file. And then I'm going to export front end. I'm going to skip zip and don't init again in prod by doing run reflex export --front end -only -no -zip. And now I'm going to want Docker to run reflex run. So in my project folder, I'm going to create a new file and call this docker-entrypoint.sh. And this is going to be my shell script. So I'm going to start with #!bin/bash and then set -e. Then I'm going to start Redis with redis-server --daemonize yes, and then run migrations if the Alembic folder exists by doing if --d Alembic in double quotes semicolon, then reflex db migrate phi, and then finally start Reflex App with exec reflex run --env prod. Save this. Let's go back to my Dockerfile. Here I'm going to manage my entry point script. So copy docker-entrypoint.sh into /user/local/bin folder as docker-entrypoint.sh, and then run changed +x, this same file, to give it permission to execute, and then finally to use the bash script as the entry point by doing entrypoint docker-entrypoint.sh and save. Now I want to turn this into a Docker image and save it into an AWS repository. So let's search for ECR and click on the link to Elastic Container Registry. And I'm going to go ahead and create a repository. And now for the repository name, we can give it a namespace, which is like a collection of repositories followed by the individual repository name. So what I'm going to do is call my namespace Calvin Yoon and the repository as the name of my project. And I'm okay with these settings for my repository, so I'm going to click on Create. Now here we have our URI, which is the address to this repository, so this is where I want to send my Docker image. Let's go back to my project terminal, and I'm just going to clear this, and I want to make sure that I'm in my project directory, which I am, so I can do docker build -f Dockerfile -t, copy the URI to the repository that we just made, paste it here, and then follow this with a colon and the version that you want to give it. Just a heads up, this entire thing is going to be the name of your Docker image. So if you prefer something shorter, then you're welcome to call it something else at this step. So for me personally, I want to start with 0.0. And then I'm going to do -- platform Linux/AMD64. Enter. Now you can see we're building this Docker image. And now we've finished creating the Docker image. Now I'm going to see if I can access my AWS account from my terminal. I'm going to do AWS -- version, and it says the command AWS was not found. So let's install the AWS CLI. As per the instructions, I'm going to do sudo apt install AWS CLI, enter, type in my password, and it says that AWS CLI has no installation candidate. So let's go into the documentation. I'm going to click on Linux, scroll down, and it says to use this command block. So I'm going to copy, go back to my terminal, and paste, enter, and I get an error that says I could not find Python, but we do have Python 3, so let's reroute it with sudo ln -s/user/bin/python3 with /user/bin/python. Enter. And then let me try to rerun the install command. And we've successfully installed AWS CLI. Let me double check with AWS -- version. And so we're good there. Now I want to set up my connector. So I'm going to do AWS configure. It's asking me for my AWS access key ID. So let me go back to AWS. I'm going to duplicate this tab, and I could find this in my AIM. So let's go there, click on users. I'm going to click on the user that I've created. Then I'm going to go to security credentials, scroll down, copy my access key, and paste it in the terminal. Enter. Now it asks for my secret access key, and this was provided when I first created the user. So I'm going to paste that here. I'm going to input my default region name. Now I'm going to input my default output format. Let me clear this terminal. And now I'm going to do AWS ECR get-login-password --region, and then whichever region your ECR is in, followed by pipe docker login --username AWS --password -stdin, and this is going to be followed by my ECR URI. So let's go back and let's get that URI, copy and paste, and enter. Let me try this again because I had a typo in password. Enter, and we successfully logged into ECR. So up to this point, we've created our Docker image, which you could see here in Docker Desktop, and we've logged into ECR. Now we can push the Docker image into our repository. So I'm going to do docker push, followed by the name of my Docker image, including the tag or the version that we've decided. Enter. Now you can see we're pushing the Docker image into the ECR repository. So let's give this a minute or two. It's finished pushing, so let's go to ECR. I'm going to click on the repository name, and now our image lives here. Now let's create a virtual machine that will host my project. I'm going to duplicate this tab, and I'm going to search for EC2. So let's click on this, and I want to launch instance. The name I want to give my EC2 instance is ikigaism_EC2. For my OS, I'm going to select Ubuntu, and I see that it's the same version. Let me scroll down. And for my project, I'm going to select T2 Micro because I think 1 GB of memory is sufficient. I'm going to select my key pair to log into my instance. And if you're just starting, you can go ahead and create a new key pair. Now, for my firewall, I want to allow SSH traffic, and I also want to allow HTTPS traffic from the internet. And as for the storage, I'm okay with 8 GB. Just as an afterthought, it's better to go from 8 GB of storage to 30 GB of storage to save yourself from the headache that I'm about to experience in a little bit. So now on the right side, I'm going to click on Launch Instance. Let's click on the instance that we just created and click on the instance ID. On the top right, I'm going to click on Connect and connect using a public IP and make sure that my username is Ubuntu. So connect. Now I'm in my virtual machine. We're starting with a blank slate. So I want to install Docker and AWS CLI. Let me start with sudo apt update, and then I'm going to do sudo apt install -y docker.io. Now I'm going to do sudo systemctl enable docker, and then sudo systemctl start docker. Now I'm going to install AWS CLI using the same command line as before. So copy and paste using right click like this and enter. We have to install unzip. So let's do sudo apt install unzip. Let's paste the command again, enter. And it's saying that it can't find Python. So let's create that symlink with sudo ln -s user bin python3 with user bin python. Enter. Now let's run the sudo install command. Now it's saying we need to install the Python 3 virtual environment package. So let's do that with sudo apt install python 3.12-venv. Enter. Hit yes for continue. And let's try to install AWS CLI again. Now you could see we're installing AWS. Now that we have AWS set up, let's pull the Docker image from the ECR into the virtual machine. So let's log into ECR with AWS ECR get login password -- region, whatever region your repository is in, followed by pipe docker login -- username AWS -- password stdin, followed by your ECR link. So let's get that. Let me click repositories and copy the URI. Let's go back to the EC2 instance and paste using right click and enter. And it says I need to configure AWS, which is true. I misspoke earlier. All we did was just install AWS. So let's run AWS configure and enter the access key, which I'm going to paste, and also the secret access key, just like that. Set my default region, which is US East, and then my output format, which is JSON. Now we can log into ECR, enter. I got an error with my access key because I copied over the wrong one. So I'm going to clear this terminal and try again with AWS configure. Okay, let me try to log in again. And now login succeeded. Let's go back to ECR and click on the repository name. Now I want to pull the image from ECR. So I can do that with docker pull, followed by my image name, including the version we want to pull. And I'm getting an error that says permission denied while trying to connect to Docker. Well, that's because our user doesn't have permission to access the Docker socket. So let's give it permission with sudo usermod -a docker $user, and then refresh with exec su -l $user, enter. I'm going to type in my password. I'm getting an authentication failure, so I'm going to go back to my EC2 instance and hit connect again, and the same thing, connect using a public IP. I'm going to docker pull my image, and now you could see the image is being pulled from ECR. And then I'm going to do docker run -it -rm -p 3000:3000 -p 8000:8000, followed by the image name with the tag that I want to run, enter. And now you could see we're starting the Reflex app. Let's give this a few minutes. Now it's been about 9 minutes, and I feel that this is running slower than expected. I'm going to kill this process with Control-C. I think the RAM is still low, so let's do free -h, and I want to add a swap file that can provide extra memory space for my system when the physical RAM is full. So let's try this again. Sudo fallocate -l 2g/swapfile, and then sudo changemod 600/swapfile to set the permissions, and then sudo mkswap/swapfile to make the swap area, and then sudo swapon/swapfile to activate the swap. Now I want to make this permanent so that the swap can be used after reboot. So I'm going to do sudo nano/etc/fstab, and at the end of this file, I'm going to add /swapfile none swap sw00. Then I'm going to do Control-X and hit Y to save and enter. Now let's do the docker run command, enter. We're starting the Reflex app, and let's see if it continues from where we left off. We see that it's making some progress, and now the app is running at localhost 3000. Let's check if we can access port 3000. Let's go back to the Volumes tab so that I can return to instances, and then I'm going to click on the instance ID for my project. Here I can see the public IP address, so I'm going to copy and open a new tab and paste. It says this site can't be reached. What if we change this to HTTP and it still can't be reached? I'm going to go to Instance Details and go to Security, scroll down. Let's click on Security Groups, and I want to edit inbound rules. I'm going to add a rule to allow HTTP traffic. And for the subnet, I'm going to do all zeros. I'm going to add another rule to allow custom TCP and set the port range to 3000 and set the IPs to 0. Let's save rules. Now, if I attach port 3000, then it takes me to my app. If I do https:// then it prevents me from accessing. Now let's go to the tab for one of our earlier sessions, and I'm going to look for Cloudfront. This is our CDN. I'm going to create distribution, and for my origin domain, I'm going to go back to my EC2 instances and copy the public DNS and paste it here. For the protocol, I want HTTP only. I'm going to scroll down until custom SSL certificate, and we need to request a certificate. So let's click on this, and I'm going to request a public certificate, hit next. My fully qualified domain name is going to be my web domain, and I'm going to add another name to the certificate, and this one's going to be my web domain with www in front. Everything else looks okay, so I'm going to hit request. Let's click on view certificate. Now I want to create records in Route 53, so let's click on this. Both of these are highlighted, so let's create records, and it says we successfully created DNS records. Let's refresh the page. Let's go back to Cloudfront distributions, and I'm going to refresh the SSL certificates, and here in the dropdown, we could see our latest certificate. So let's click on that. Let's scroll down. I'm going to add support for HTTP, and on the bottom right, let's create distribution. It seems I missed this section, so for the web application firewall, I don't need to enable security protections. But that is for my particular use case. So let's go down and create distribution. Now let's return to Cloudfront, and it's currently deploying, but this is something I might want to check back in half an hour or so. Now I'm going to click on the distribution ID. I expected to see the alternate domain names here, but I don't see them. So let's click on the distribution ID, and on the right side, let's click on edit. Here I see alternate domain name, so I'm going to click on add item, and I'm going to input my domains like this, scroll down, and save changes. I see that it's still deploying, so let's give it some more time. I refresh the page, and here's my updated status. I'm going to duplicate this tab so that I can go back to Route 53. I'm going to click on my hosted zones and click on my domain. Now I want to create a record. For my first record, I'm going to keep the record name blank. I want it to be type A. I want to select alias, and I want to alias to Cloudfront distribution. The distribution is what we created earlier, and I'm going to hit create records. I want to create another record where the subdomain is www. This is also an alias, and likewise, I'm going to select Cloudfront distribution and select my distribution, and then create records. If I go to DNS checker and I search for my web domain and filter my A-type records, then I could see that my records have started to propagate. Now at this stage, if I do https ikigaism.com, then I get this 502 error. It says that Cloudfront attempted to establish a connection with the origin, but either the attempt failed or the origin closed the connection. Now it's time to set up a reverse proxy to forward port 80 to port 3000. So let's go back to my EC2 terminal. I'm actually going to open a new session. So back to my instances, instance ID, connect, and connect again. I'm going to do sudo apt install nginx -y, and now I'm installing nginx. Now I'm going to do sudo systemctl start nginx, and then sudo systemctl enable nginx. I'm going to clear my terminal. I'm going to do cd/etc/nginx, and now I'm going to do ls-a, and this shows me the nginx.config file, but instead of modifying this config file, I'm going to create my own. So let's cd into sites-available, which is this folder here, and let's check the contents with ls-a, and I'm going to create my new file by doing sudo nano reflex, and here I'm going to set up my reverse proxy. I'm going to do server curly braces listen 80 semicolon server underscore name is ikigaism.com semicolon, and this part's going to take care of the front end application, which are the HTTP requests. Now the next part's going to take care of the WebSocket and backend API requests, and this is the code that I used to set up my reverse proxy. I'm going to Control X and hit Y to save, and then enter. Now I'm going to run sudo nginx -t to test, and it says that the syntax is okay and the test is successful. Now I'm going to do sudo systemctl restart nginx, enter. Let's refresh my browser, and now it says welcome to Nginx. If you see this page, the web server is successfully installed and working. Further configuration is required. I'm back in the terminal. Now I'm going to enable my config file. I'm going to do sudo ln -s/etc/nginx/sites available /reflex with /etc/nginx/sites enabled and then I'm going to disable the default site by doing sudo rm /etc/nginx/sites enabled /default. And let's run the test again with sudo nginx -t. The test was successful. And now sudo systemctl reload nginx. And let's go back to our browser and refresh. And here we have our page. And to double check, I see that my page is interactive and I could click on the link. There is one more thing that we have to check. If we go back to the instance details and we go to security, we want to tighten our rules. So let's go to the security groups and edit the inbound rules. I don't need to allow HTTPS traffic because that's handled by Cloudfront. So I can delete this. And I don't want to expose port 3000, so I can delete this. And I just want to allow SSH as well as HTTP. But there are obviously more things you could be doing to enhance security. So let's save rules, and we are done. So in this tutorial, we've successfully deployed our app onto an EC2 virtual machine, and we were able to access it using a custom domain that we've given an SSL certificate.